It's the middle of a very beautiful storm outside right now, so I figured that I ought to record, really just for the sake of capturing the sound of the rain and the thunder. Yep, it's definitely going out there. I love it. All the rain is streaking down the glass. You can hear the pitter patter all over the windows, and even the place I'm in shakes a little bit with each wind gust. Thankfully, it's heavy enough, but right now, at this moment, I'm downloading a large file onto my computer and figuring out what what I want to do next. And well, mainly, as I said, I just wanted to kind of capture the sound of the rain. This would be a unique opportunity, so I'm hopping onto it. There are some things. There's something that's been on my mind recently. The main thing that's been on my mind recently is Ko-Fi, Kofi, or Patreon. And I've been thinking to myself, like, I think I'm going to make a Ko-Fi, a coffee, however it's pronounced, and or a Patreon, and put a link to it with this channel. I don't expect anything from it, you know. I'm not looking forward to anything from it, or, no obligations, but it's one of those things where I know if I get skittish about it and I never try it and I never do it, I'm just going to regret later that I never tried it or gave it a go or just made it an option at all. Now, as I said already, I don't expect anything to come of it or, that it would see any use necessarily. But you know what? I'm a fan of covering my bases. So, you know what? I figured I might as well. Just in case. So, yeah, I was looking into that today. Among other things, I also did a once over of just looking at my paychecks and things like that. And I calculated dates based on switching the rent date to the 30th, and it really seems like this is going to be a really good thing for me being able to cover more of my rent on my own. You see, previously, the 5th date, and I said this before, it was eating up half my paycheck before the other half could even come in. But with this change up, I'll actually be able to get in 4 paychecks and only leave $20 to have to be covered, which I can supplement. I can try and supplement through other means. Yeah. But that's all been on my mind recently, so yeah. I think today, right now the file I'm downloading is like 75 gigabytes, and so far it's only 2.5 gigabytes through. I've got a drive that's like 4 terabytes in size, so I've got something to hold it, but this is definitely going to take a while for this download to finish. Yeah. I know sometimes it can feel antsy or like uncouth, pandering to put, what's the right word? It can feel, just not feel great, just like if someone like, does the whole like Patreon or Ko-Fi thing, especially if they really like lay it on thick. But yeah, 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 I'm just gonna go for it. Just so I can say that I did it. And I won't have regrets later. But, yeah. And it'll just be entirely up to anyone who wants to do it. I don't think I'm gonna promote it or anything like that, unless it's like I'm doing like a creative project and it's like, if you want to support more of this, blah 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 blah. But like doing something special, like like a creative project or things like that. But just journals like these, like, no, not really. But recently, the trailer. Ooh. Recently, the trailer for Dragon Quest XII came out, and I was sad to see that Flames of Fate is no longer that there's no more Flames of Fate. I was looking forward to whatever that was going to be. It sounded really cool. Like, it kind of it kind of reminded me of like Dragon Quest V, where your choices like affect later paths. But though mainly in Dragon Quest V, your choices mainly just affect like who your character ends up getting married to. But the idea of them going for that, and it's not the first time that Yuji Horii and the Dragon Quest team has made an attempt at things where it's like ripple effects and making choices that send you down different paths and things like that. But I guess whatever they had going just wasn't working out, so they ended up having to scrap it. Flames of Fate became Beyond Dreams. I hope it turns out well, because there's a previous game I was looking forward to, Metroid Prime 4, and it also became Beyond, and it ended up restarting development and not turning out very well. So I hope this is a successful Beyond, with Beyond Dreams and a restarted development of a game that's been in development for a while. But I really do hope it works out. That really doesn't have anything to do with anything. It's just unfortunate having had dealt with Metroid Prime 4 Beyond and now another game that I had my eye on restarting development and becoming Beyond as well. But the trailer is interesting. The character design of the human design, it's an odd one. There's definitely something underlying it that doesn't feel quite like it matches up with the previous Dragon Quest protagonists. So there's just something about it. There was something that was interesting to me, though, which is that in the actual trailer slash news update from Yuji Horii and the guy he was with, is that they said Akira Toriyama's characters slash designs, it was one of those words, characters slash designs and Sugiyama's music will appear in the game. But that they didn't explicitly say that the main character was designed by Toriyama. They just said that Toriyama's characters slash designs and Sugiyama's music will be in the game in general. But they didn't point to any specific characters or focus on anyone in particular and say, this is Toriyama's character design. Like when Xenoverse 3 was revealed, they were very upfront and like clear. Like, these character designs are Akira Toriyama's character designs. Toriyama made these, he designed these characters himself. And, they made sure to be very explicit, like, the basis of this story comes from him. They were very clear on Toriyama's contribution to the project. Whereas with Dragon Quest XII, I just think I think the wording is interesting. I don't know if there's really anything to read into it, but just the vagueness of the wording being his characters and, Sugiyama's music will be in the game in a general sense. And so, I don't know. I would believe it that the main character of 12, the human form, at least, what I'm gonna in a second, the human design, I would believe that it's not Toriyama who designed that character. There's like little things about it that don't really fit or like come together quite right. There's like these little things that don't feel quite right, especially when you compare it. Not that it's inherently a bad design. It's just, I guess the main thing is it doesn't, there's like an uncanniness to it that makes it not feel like Toriyama. That's not necessarily a mark against the design. It's just the question of, did Toriyama illustrate and design that character? And while it has some hallmarks and design aspects, there's like a bunch of little things that don't feel quite right that it's his design. Now, if it does turn out to be, maybe there's just an instance of like, oh, he did something that doesn't quite feel like the rest of how he designs things, like the way the armor is done, little things about the face. It's strange. It's like an uncanny. It's like being. It is uncanny because that's kind of what uncanniness is. You're being presented with something that, one, they didn't specify whether it was actually designed by Toriyama or not, the design, and two, it's very much being presented to be in line, but there's like these little things that feel off about it. And I think that's like one of the main things that is causing people to kind of question or feel off about it. Not inherently necessarily the design itself, but the fact that there's still the expectation that it's Toriyama's design and trying to sort of mentally group it up with the other work that he has done, there's something that's like makes it hard to accept it as being from Toriyama's hand and imagination. It's just a bunch of little things that feel off, if that makes sense. Little things that feel off. But in terms of the overall trailer, visually, it looks striking. Good. Dragon Quest XI, came out back on like PS4, Switch, and it still looked great. I have this memory of Dragon Quest XI being like the first confirmed game for the Switch back in the day. Was that true? It feels like it was. I feel like I remember, like, that was the first ever game that was confirmed for Nintendo's new console, essentially. Or was it called the Switch then? I don't know. It was so long ago. But the trailer, I get lots of feelings of previous Dragon Quest games in it. Well, first off, Beyond Dreams and certain visual design elements. It kind of harkens back to Dragon Quest VI, which its entire theme was like an illusory dream world, even with a flying bed, and, the waking world. But also, there's a lot of aspects of it that remind me a lot of Dragon Quest IX. Now, I actually own Dragon Quest IX. I have it on the DS. That means that a lot of the content is locked because, there's no more online to get all the special stuff unless you find some specific hardware with software in it. You got to do some special things to do that. Connect to a server. It's like a whole thing. Well, like there's an option of like finding a server and connecting to it, and then there's like this thing where you can get like this hard drive thing that has like the data on it, and there's like a whole thing where you can't like action shark it. You can't like replay, like those hack carts that let you unlock stuff, because apparently there's something going on where it'll break the game. But anywho, yeah, I own Dragon Quest IX, and there's a lot of aspects of, and I played through it. I played through Dragon Quest IX as well, and there's a lot of aspects of. Sorry, now I'm just thinking of my playthrough of Dragon Quest IX. Anyway, there's a lot of aspects of Dragon Quest XII that remind me of Dragon Quest IX. Especially like some of the architecture and the areas. Another thing is the logo itself. It has a tower thing that reminds me a lot of the observatory in Dragon Quest IX, where all the Celestials live. So I'm wondering if they're going to do something like that, because the way Dragon Quest narratively breaks down is you have Dragon Quest 1 and 2, which are sequential. So you have Dragon Quest 1, and then 2 is like the descendants of the characters in Dragon Quest 1. And then Dragon Quest 3 is the prequel to Dragon Quest 1 and 2. And that's the Erdrick / Loto trilogy. And then the next after that is Dragon Quest 4, which kicks off the Zenithian trilogy. So you have Dragon Quest 4, and then followed up the Descendants. It follows the same pattern as 1, 2, and 3, where Dragon Quest 4, then Dragon Quest 5 is the Descendants from Dragon Quest 4. The follow-up, it's like directly after Dragon Quest 4. And then Dragon Quest 6, like Dragon Quest 3, is the origin point, essentially. Dragon Quest 6 is the beginning of the Zenithian trilogy. And then Dragon Quest 7 and 8 are standalones. Dragon Quest 7 is its own self-contained story. Dragon Quest 8 is its own self-contained story. And then all the Dragon Quest games have like references and Easter eggs to each other. Not that they're all in the same world, but it's more of like a out-of-game meta kind of thing, just for fun. Like you'll find Torneko Tuluna in a bunch of games. You'll find it's just like for fun Easter egg references and just callbacks. But so Dragon Quest 7 and 8 are standalone, self-contained narratives, and then Dragon Quest 9 and Dragon Quest 10 are like a duology. So you have Dragon Quest 9, and then Dragon Quest 10 is a sequel, like way in the future after Dragon Quest 9. At least like parts of it. But overall, Dragon Quest 10 is in itself a sequel to Dragon Quest 9. And so Dragon Quest 9 and 10 don't yet have their version of Dragon Quest 3 and Dragon Quest 6, where there's the third game in a trilogy, where there's a third game that makes it a trilogy that takes place before the events of the other two games. Now, Dragon Quest 11 is kind of a special case, because Dragon Quest 11 makes Dragon Quest 1, 2, and 3 sort of, what is it, like a tetralogy? A quadrilogy? So, it's one of those. But Dragon Quest 11... The thing about Dragon Quest 11 is that its narrative really doesn't have anything to do with 1, 2, and 3 per se. I wouldn't necessarily make it a quadrilogy so much as like the origin of the origin. It's straight because like 1, 2, and Dragon Quest 1, 2, and 3 are like directly related to each other. They have a narrative through line that goes through each game. So 3 is like Lotto or Erdrick, and then Dragon Quest 2 is, or Dragon Quest 1 is the descendants of Erdrick, and then Dragon Quest 2 is the descendants of the characters from Dragon Quest 1. There's like a through line of like the same world being present throughout each game. Like each game has its own. Each game is like the same world, but at different points in time, with the origin of it being explored in Dragon Quest 3. But Dragon Quest 11 takes place so far in the past. It's essentially Dragon Quest 11 is its own completely standalone separate story with a twist that it has a strong narrative tie to being the origin of the of Dragon Quest 1, 2, and 3, the first trilogy. But it's disconnected enough that I wouldn't necessarily group it. It's just kind of it's chronologically connected to them, those games, but it's not narratively or necessarily thematically tied to them. You know, you don't you're traveling through like a past. You're traveling through a land that will one day become the lands you travel through in, you know, Dragon Quest 1, 2, and 3. But that's kind of just where it ends. It's just the fact that it's connected and a prequel to Dragon Quest 3 is more of just a fact than an actual mechanic or function of that story. It's more of just something fun, you know, like a surprise connection, a surprise twist, like, ooh, this is actually before Dragon Quest 3, and it's the origin of the story of the Luminary, and this will go on to inspire the main character of Dragon Quest 3, and he'll go on his adventure, and that's and you really just kind of get that at, like, the end of the game, and it's pretty much where it ends after, like, that's pretty much all that 11 has to do with 3, is just that in a factual way it takes place before 3, and, you know, centuries, thousands of years later 3 will happen. That's pretty much what is going on with 11. But with 12, I'm wondering if they're going to create the Dragon Quest 3/6 for the story that is going on in 9 and 10. And so essentially explain the creation or the origin of the Celestians, and that whole deal. You know, the demon realm and the Celestians and things like that. Sandy. But so far from what we've seen, and I think it's interesting, the idea that, I mean, it's called Beyond Dreams, so, and it makes sense why the main character might have like baggy eyes, like, or like dark circles around his eyes, may not get enough sleep, ties in the theme of dreams. He's tired. It's just the design looks, I already said that. The design looks kind of off. Uncanny in certain ways. But I think it's an interesting idea, and I think it could very much be true that the lizard slash dragon creature we see, the green humanoid dragon guy we see in Dragon Quest XII's trailer, could very well be an alternate form of that human, the human hero. Now, I've seen some things kind of like pointing towards that the dragon slash lizard form might actually be the character's actual body slash form, and that the human form might actually be the alternate form, which could be interesting. I don't know. Like, I'm not going to subscribe necessarily to any interpretation yet. We have like a single trailer, but I think that could be really interesting. And it again, that's another thing that, if it's true, reminds me heavily of Dragon Quest VI, which is that, there's a certain character in Dragon Quest VI, a companion, who in one world is a human girl, and in the other world is a female dragon. Depending on whether you're in the dream world, the illusory world, or you're in the real world. So it could be a mechanic like that at play in Dragon Quest XII, similar to Dragon Quest VI, utilizing that whole dream thing. Now, something else. I wonder if they would attempt to connect the different trilogies of Dragon Quest all into like one thing. Like, if they're purposefully having elements of Dragon Quest VI, elements of Dragon Quest IX, so on and so forth, to try and bridge the different continuities together. I kind of don't want that to happen. I like that we have, the Erdrick slash Lotto trilogy, and that then there's the Zenithian trilogy. 7 and 8 are their own standalone things. 9 and 10 kind of form. I wouldn't mind if it were related to, whether it's a prequel or a sequel to 9 and 10, or goes before 9 and 10. Yeah. I'm wondering how they're going to. If it is, Dragon Quest 9 and 10 are probably the most mechanically depthful that the turn-based combat has ever gotten when it comes to Dragon Quest combat. The sheer amount of different states the characters get in, the level 5 games did a lot of work with Dragon Quest IX's battle system. The sheer amount of just moods and personality traits and different states that the enemies can get into, the way it affects the flow of combat. They definitely brought things more back to basics in Dragon Quest XI, but if 12 is related to that, and Dragon Quest X with its whole pushing enemies and distance and things like that, I wonder, it would be cool to see them return a lot of the elements that Dragon Quest IX introduced into the combat, spicing it up with elements of Dragon Quest X's combat. Not the MMORPG style of it, but some of the mechanics pulled out and then modified to work well as a single player turn-based RPG. Because I don't want it to be like Final Fantasy VII Remake and 16 and Final Fantasy 12, where it's MMORPG combat in a single player game, and then it's just really boring. Just but taking elements from Dragon Quest X's combat system and modifying it and making it work in a single player framework. I think there are definitely a lot of elements you could take from it. Uh, and spice it up. Spice it up. And I'm thinking, when it comes to Dragon Quest 12, I guess one of the main things I'm worried about is because they restarted development, how much of like Sugiyama's music is going to get retained, because the last thing he composed for was for Flames of Fate, and it's not Flames of Fate anymore. And the last Toriyama he designed for it was Flames of Fate, Dragon Quest XII Flames of Fate. So I wonder if they're going to reuse as many of the designs as they can and as much of the music as they can, but fit it into new contexts and new situations. Basically, just, you know how like sometimes you imagine a scene, you put on some music and there's like a certain scene you imagine to it, and then like you kind of associate it with that scene, but then later you can listen to it again and think of a different story with the same music. I wonder, like, yeah, if they can essentially if they will do something like that, which is take the work that was already done for Dragon Quest XII Flames of Fate, now that it's beyond dreams, taking the music that was made for it, taking the designs that were made for it, and just finding new life for them, a new context for them to fit in, something for them to do, you know. The designs and the music essentially just, the designs are empty shells you can rewrite a new narrative for, find places to fit them in, and the music itself can fit different situations, than what it was written for in Flames of Fate necessarily. I mean, it is very versatile music. You could create a new scenario for the music to go on top of. So, I'm just worried. I'm worried that with it restarting development and becoming beyond dreams, if anything is going to get thrown out. I hope they don't. I hope they manage to be able to use everything that was made for Flames of Fate and find a new purpose and new life for those elements to work in. Like all the music that was composed for Flames of Fate, all the designs that were done, before the passing of Toriyama and Sugiyama. It would be great if they managed to keep things from their previous attempt. And hopefully we'll get to find out what Flames of Fate was like. What that scrap to build, what exactly the issues were, what they were going for, what they couldn't figure out, what the narrative was going to be like, what the key mechanics, the kind of general direction of it. Like, I do hope that we get to at least learn about Flames of Fate. And I hope it's a situation where it really was just that, they couldn't find a way to make it work, they didn't like the direction, and so they really just decided, like, to go in a better one, actually restart, not like beyond restarting, where they just took what they had and just gave it to another team and told them to keep going with their broken idea. I'm hoping that it's an actual like reevaluation and that they're going in a direction that they see as being more quality and fitting for Dragon Quest. I'm hoping, at least. But it would be very interesting to learn what Flames of Fate was going to be. It's not every day that like something like that happens, like a whole entire idea, a version, iteration that has been like you've known about for years just gets restarted, thrown out and restarted. Like, with Resident Evil 4, that wasn't quite the same. There were like test builds as they were going through different iterations and ideas, and then a lot of those were just like they decided that wasn't it, and it would be given to another team, and they would go make a game off of it, that kind of thing. And they would do like test builds and quick vertical slice, like quick prototypes and a quick, like a pilot almost, or a test run just to see how it would go, and then they'd hit like a spot in the development where it was just like, this isn't quite it, you know, and then they would restart again, go from another angle, another direction, try something else. But with Dragon Quest 12, I mean, it's been Flames of Fate for a very long time now. Like, they tried to develop it, and now it's just like whoop, it's gone. And now they've settled into this Beyond Dreams version of Dragon Quest 12. So I wonder what's gonna happen with that. It's funny to me that Dragon Quest 12 is finally, Dragon Quest has finally reached 12, whereas like Final Fantasy is gearing up for, it finished 16, so obviously what's next is Final Fantasy 17. Meanwhile, Dragon Quest is finally reaching 12. But in general, Dragon Quest tends to have more consistent quality when it comes to games. Like, there are ones that are hit and miss, but when it comes down to it, yeah, Dragon Quest generally has a more consistent, slower but more consistent output. Just incredibly solid, well built, like people who know what they're doing, just like incredibly engrossing and charming, to the point, like JRPG stuff, Whereas Final Fantasy can't really seem to keep its footing. Dragon Quest, it just kind of keeps doing and continually mastering its craft, honing in on it. And then when they want to try something else, they make like a spin-off. Dragon Quest Builders, and man, like those Dragon Quest guys, they're really good at what they do. Even when they do spin-offs, like again, you can see the works, you can see the handiwork of like craftsmen, of experts of the field, there's just a touch to it. And whenever the guys who make Dragon Quest go on to make like spin-offs or other games, you can always just see their handiwork behind it. There's a certain mark of quality that, like, no matter what, it's like, ah, yeah, this team made this. They know what they're doing. Yeah. It's also funny to me that half the time, whenever there's like a Pokemon spin-off, it's basically just Dragon Quest, something Dragon Quest related, dressed up as Pokemon. A lot of the time, like Pokopia, Dragon Quest Builders, and Mystery Dungeon, which is a spin-off of Mystery Dungeon, which Mystery Dungeon is originally a Dragon Quest game. Like, it's yeah. Even a Pokemon Coliseum, made by former Dragon Quest developers, yeah. Those guys, they've got a knack for what they do. Yeah. They're very good at it. I'm glad they're able to do that. Just taking a deep breath. just saying a prayer that everything works out. I'm distracting myself talking about Dragon Quest 12, but yeah. Listen to that rain, a little pitter patter on the ceiling and on the walls. Done a good job, thankfully, of sealing things up so no water's getting in, nothing's leaking into the roof or anything like that. This place is insulated from the elements. Yeah. Wanted to talk about how work went today. When I started off working today, I made two errors, two pretty crucial ones. Unfortunately, it was with the same person twice, and I felt so it felt crummy holding it onto it into my brain. So what I did is I asked my manager for a pen and a piece of paper, and I wrote down self accountability like note, and I wrote down a thing. It said like error resolution, and I wrote down like the person who in regards the error was made. Was it resolved, yes or no? Who was it resolved by, and what was the cause of the error? And after I did that, it kind of got me to stop being so self-critical and self-conscious at the start of the day. I didn't want to carry that throughout the day and end up making more mistakes, getting hyperfixated on it, you know? And so, hold on. My computer, I can't let it go to sleep because it's still downloading. It's currently at 42.4 gigabytes. Not bad. It must have sped up somewhere along the way. Okay, cool. I thought it was going to take way longer. All right, nice. It's about halfway there. About halfway, not quite, but yeah, so I made an accountability log. Just so, yeah, error resolution, and then I wrote down those two things, and it just like got it out of me. Just something about having it there in writing, and I just kept it, next to my booth slash desk area. And if there were ever any other, big errors that I made, I was going to write them down there. But thankfully, something about that just like got my head in gear, and I was able to work more effectively and more efficiently. And you know what? No more errors got added to that list throughout the day, thankfully. I was very pleased though. Yeah, just it helped me to know that, those two errors weren't going to define my entire day. That the rest of the day I did my job. I managed it. There were only two issues that got fixed up. It was a small part of the day. Just, recover, your rebound, and then keep on going. And that helped a lot. It did help a lot. I always dislike being called things like buddy or things like that. I'm too prone to seeing people as being like condescending towards me. It's a bad habit of mine. But yeah, like if I perceive that someone is treating me like I'm naive or stupid, it messes with me. Not that they are, but a lot of the times I can perceive things that way. And like, yeah, I was mopping an area, and one of my coworkers was like, "You want to move that to the back, buddy?" And I just said like, "In a moment." Not rudely. That was maybe a little too terse the way I just said it. I just said like, "In a moment. Once I'm done with this area, I'll come back and take it back with me." And then I went, took care of responsibility. I set it there so I could take it back later, and just in case that I needed it again with the area I was cleaning. So I just made it clear, like, in a minute, I'll come back for it. Then I'll take it back. And so that's what I did. And whenever I get those feelings of like feeling like I'm being talked down to or anything like that. I just accept it, acknowledge it, say that, it's up to me how I react to it. I don't have to. I can feel upset about it, but I don't have to. I can control how I externally respond to it while also acknowledging fully that, like, that made me feel like I'm, naive or inadequate or things like that. Just acknowledging the feelings and just taking charge of the moment and being like, oh yeah, I'll be back for it. I'll be back for it. And just keeping on going because, not to be reactive necessarily. There are times where you set boundaries and then there are times where it's just like, and I did. I essentially said, like, I'll be back for it. I'm going to go finish up my thing and then, I'll come back and take care of it. But I didn't want to get like defensive or anything like that. And I didn't. I just acknowledged the feeling and just made it clear that I'm just going to keep doing my thing and I'll be back for it in just a moment. And that felt nice, It felt nice while also acknowledging, the feeling that it gave me. Not suppressing it because then I'm gonna get. It was the same when I made those errors, those two errors, had I suppressed them, it would have just built up into something, become resentment, become anger, become like overdoing it, overreactivity, trying to overcorrect, trying to prove them wrong, it would have been like a whole thing, ungraceful, stumbly kind of thing. But I don't want to do that. So, just acknowledging it, rebounding, recovering, moving forward. Just keep doing what I was going to do. Keep on with a certain amount of confidence and just, you know, hmm. Try not to get rattled by such small things. Yeah. It's kind of ingrained into me now to read into things like that, whether they're there or not. Even if it really is there, I want to be in control of my reaction, while still acknowledging the feeling. Yeah. I am worried about tomorrow, though, because, I'm going to have to take a ride with the other person, and I dread weekend mornings and afternoons, having to be in that car. Just what could happen. It messing with me, Just hoping everything will be quiet and silent and that nothing will be said, Or that there won't be something that I'll have to try and mentally process while I'm trying to work, or that makes me feel, threatened or unsafe, or like someone's trying to pull the rug out from under me, or you know purposely take shots or target safety and stability, security, home, food, things like that. Yeah. Mm. It's a whole thing. It's a whole thing, but I think I'm ready to stop talking now, check on the progress of my download, and keep going, figure out what I'm going to do next. I have a list going of things that I'm going to do next, such as figuring out if where the place I'm at has any open jobs. Do a little internet search on that. Maybe I could work from home, but like literally work in the area where my home is. That could be possible. That could be possible. But I'll have to see. I'm hoping there's a possibility. But yeah, I'm gonna do some research on that and go from there. But yeah, I'll stop right here for now.